Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This is the second episode of season 12. And for those who did not listen to the previous episode, season 12 will be one episode per month until the end of 2024, releasing on the second Monday of every month. Right now, you are listening to the second episode in a two-part series about our trip to India up the highest paved road in the world. So if you didn't listen to the previous episode, 256, we encourage you to go back, have a listen, so you can be oriented on the story so far. We're going to jump right in. Here we go.
I had noticed a moment before that there was some cars coming up the hill. So I knew it was unsafe to pass the vehicle. Mm-hmm. And on the left side, there was no shoulder. It was the side of the mountain. So I had gotten too close to this vehicle, and because it stopped and because I was too close, I had to react. And in this reaction, I probably broke too hard on the trike, because trike brakes are only on the front two tires or wheels. And in that braking, it forced the rear wheel to come up off the ground and basically flip forward, bucking me out of the trike. And unfortunately, there wasn't like a gracious roll over and slide down. It was a very direct, straight down impact on my body, slamming into the pavement. And I landed on my right side with my arms stretched out over my head. So that right shoulder took a lot of pressure. That right shoulder kind of armpit area just hit very hard. And the right side of the hip, which is the same side I broke 5 years ago, it was obvious to me that it was a very impactful incident. It was hard to breathe for a moment as soon as it happened, but I felt the shooting pain like I felt when it was broken. So it was very much like a lot of moaning and groaning, and then I remember saying several times, "Don't move me. Don't move me." Because, everybody began to stop and come to my aid, and I wasn't sure if I could move. But I wanted to catch my breath and just try to move on my own. So after what felt to be several minutes of laying there, I was able to start moving. And I don't know, within 8 or 9 minutes, the group, the team, traffic, cars were stopping. It was pretty much, we were blocking traffic. You couldn't go around. I was in the middle of the road laying down, and then we had a lot of people and cars stopped to assist. I think we got lucky, and the ambulance, I believe, happened to be on the route going in the opposite direction. So an ambulance showed up, I think, pretty quickly. Yeah. I remember thinking, oh, wow, that was fast. And I'm still laying on the ground. Anyway, I felt like it was probably going to be okay. And everything, I was starting to move at this point. So we told the ambulance unnecessary. So they kept moving. With the help of the team, I was able to stand up. But I wasn't able to put weight on the right leg. So I knew, okay, this is going to be a minute. I'm probably done riding for the day. And with the help of the team, we hobbled into one of the vans. And I relaxed for the next 15 miles or whatever was left. The accident was roughly 37 miles into a 50-mile day.
I was like a quarter mile ahead, like just around the corner. I think we could just barely not see you guys because our view was obscured by the rocks. But we saw the ambulance come by. David, our tour guide, was with us. They radioed to him, so he was right next to me, and all they said is there's been an accident. They didn't tell us who it was or, anything about what had happened. We didn't know how bad it was.
Sure.
So we just, stayed there, and we didn't see anything for a while, right?
Yeah.
And then we started to understand, this is more than just a little spill.
Sure.
And we heard it was you and how bad it was, and our hearts just sank. We'd been planning this, obviously, for a long time.
Yeah.
And to have one of our teammates out, that was tough. But also at that point, I feel like we all had crossed our fingers, and it was my impression, and you can tell me, but you were hoping at that point things might be okay.
For sure. I was pretty confident nothing was broken at that point because I could still move. I could twist my feet and hands, and it seemed on the surface that, okay, there was no major break. So I'll just sit in the car and maybe tomorrow get back on the bike. Or maybe worst case scenario, 2 days off and get back on the bike in 2 days and finish the ride. Of course, fast forward, and for folks that follow social media, that was the end of the ride for me. We just didn't know it. The very next day, the pain, it just got worse. And the more I moved in and out of the van, and it was clear that I couldn't really do much on my own. I couldn't get my feet on the ground from the bed. The guys had to come in and help me get out of bed. They had to help me get into bed. They had to help me get out of the car. And shoot, the pain in my shoulder made it difficult to eat because I couldn't hold my food and move it to my mouth, So it was just obvious that, okay, it's not broken, but still pretty bad. We got settled in for the night. I'm still hanging out with the team in pain, but, we're managing. The next day, we started to move, and it just felt like the pain was getting worse. And I stayed with the team until that second day's lunch stop. So we'll say another 30 miles or so. And it was at the lunch spot where there was kind of a come to Jesus, it's now or never. Should I stay with the team in the car, or should I head back to a main city and begin getting medical help?
Right. And at that point, we were only getting farther away from civilization, so to speak. Yeah. And so it was kind of a critical point.
So, the decision was made, as many people know by now, to return. And thankfully, I don't know if he sees it this way, but thankfully, a teammate, Colin, who was traveling with his daughter, Alexis, she was helping with the film, he had maxed out, or he felt like he had maxed out on my elevation. At that point on day 2, you guys were riding at, say, 13.5, and he was starting to feel nauseous, a headache, and he could tell his body wasn't going to respond well to increased elevation. After I had kind of voiced the decision that I should probably leave, he let me know that he was going to leave too. And that was a godsend because, again, I didn't have a phone. And I was going to leave the team in the Himalayas. I had no way to communicate or to change my flight. Call mom and be like, hey, I'm okay, but here's what's going on. I had nothing.
Right.
So Colin and his daughter, all three of us, left the team to begin the journey back to the United States. And I don't know how things would have unfolded had Colin and his daughter not had their phones and not had the ability to help me figure everything out from that point forward.
It sounds like the whole trip back was hell, more or less.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. The pain medicine I had was ibuprofen. Like, it was not pain medicine, right? But we got back to the hotel. We were able to get a hold of some low dose tramadol. I want to say 30 milligrams. So that was better than nothing. But every transition, every time I had to get out of a car, in a car, the car ride themselves, the windy roads, the kind of jerky driving from here and there. Every time my body moved or weight shifted, there was discomfort and sharp pain somewhere. Everything about the next couple of days was horrible, in my opinion.
In and out of cars, but then, like, security in the airport, getting on the plane, in multiple planes, right?
And multiple chairs.
Yeah, one of the things that became way more clear to me on the way back was how incredibly remote that where we were was.
Yeah.
Long car ride followed by two really long plane flights to get back to the U.S. And then you live in California. So it's even farther, right? So
very similar to the last big injury. I flew back to Pennsylvania and stayed in Pennsylvania for a week. Just trying to get to a place where I could manage the wheelchair on my own. Because, pushing the manual chair with the bum shoulder was not a good time. It was an intense couple weeks. In fact, it's still, at the time we're recording it, it's been a month since the injury. I'm still feeling it and still unable to drive, still using my wheelchair, and there's still a lot of limitations, but I've come a long ways just in the 4 weeks.
I understand that you've got an MRI coming up to give it a little more information. You hadn't got one yet, right?
Yeah. As soon as I got back to the States, I went to the ER. That was the first real medical attention. 2 days after the injury, 3 days especially, it just seemed obvious to me that there was some serious damage, and I didn't feel comfortable engaging in medical services in India, so I chose to wait till we got back to the States. Took a direct flight to Pennsylvania and went straight to the ER. Jen and Felicia picked me up, thankfully, and we went straight to we did get Starbucks on the way to the ER. Mostly because it had been a long couple days. Colin and I and Alexis, we sat in the Delhi airport for 15 hours. With nothing. Not the hangout area where you have cafes and coffees and stuff to do. It was like in the front side of the airport where there was nothing. And we couldn't get through security anyway. So it's just been a long couple days. I'm in a lot of pain. And Jen and Felicia and I were both like, okay, we do kind of want to hurry to get to the ER. But what if we end up sitting there for 2, 3, 4 hours? Maybe we should get breakfast. I voted for a sausage and cheddar sandwich and a nitro cold brew from Starbucks, and they were gracious enough to stop and get it for me.
What if that was the standard procedure for a trip to the ER? Like, ambulance picks you up, and before you get there, you go through the Starbucks drive-thru.
Well, I would imagine if you're arriving in an ambulance, you're probably not going to be waiting 3 or 4 hours. We just walked in.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the entire thing, from starting with the intake paperwork to paying my copay when we're all said and done and getting my discharge papers, I think we were at the ER for just under 3 hours, all said and done. So it was a very pleasant and somewhat efficient experience. Yeah, that was kind of a lot.
It is a lot, though. We planned on this, like I was saying, for a long time and put a lot into it. It's just a lot to process.
You make a good point. I still have a lot to process because, all things considered, the energy, the effort that went into planning, and then the trip not going as planned, I know that I still have some things to work through. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not making a joke. I do believe there's probably room for a professional, a therapist, to help me work through a couple things, which I intend to do as soon as I'm at a place where I'm a little more dependent. Besides the injury, everything that goes into a trip of that nature not going as planned, and it's not like, oh, I'll just do it again next month. You can't just reschedule.
Planning all of it, but that's one thing. We had some very generous sponsors.
Yep.
And raised a lot of money just for the operations, the logistics of the trip. Yep. That is not an insignificant thing that people were willing to put up money to be able to help our team make it go.
Yep. And I will say, on one hand, I know the accident isn't held against me. But there is a sense of embarrassment and maybe a little bit of shame. Not controlling, but there's those thoughts. There's like, oh, you know, a lot of people were cheering you on, and a lot of people gave money, and you crashed. There's some legit wrestling that's unfolding, and it's probably good to talk about it, but you know, I know that not one person, so I'm not at all saying, oh, I need everybody to tell me they don't judge me, but there's still those thoughts of failure, if you will. It's not like I was blindsided and the accident was completely out of my control. There was an element of in the moment, reactionary, chose to brake, and I broke too hard. Could I have controlled that a little more? Or maybe I shouldn't have been so close to the car. There's so many thoughts that go through my head of, could I have done anything to have a different outcome? Of course the answer is yes, but is it reasonable for me to have those types of expectations? So anyway, there's just a wide range of thoughts that I've got to process and work through. And I don't see that being super easy or super quick. Especially with my current state being the injury itself. There's a lot of sitting around. It's a lot of by myself and kind of a lot of time to hang out in my own head, which may or may not be a good thing.
We're out on this road with a bunch of traffic, 1,000 different factors. I honestly think that could have happened to any of us at any time. Like, it could have happened to me 12 different times.
Sure. It's still a trip of a lifetime, so glad I went and made it happen. Just disappointed in the way things turned out in many ways.
All right, so Sean, you and Colin and Alexis have gone back to the U.S. It's me and my dad and John Hardigan and Brian Griggs and Uncle Steve. We continue for a couple of days, and it's so hot. The temperature registered like 75 or 80 degrees, but the sun, I think we were talking about this, was so intense. There's a big climb on day 4, and then day 5 is the final summit. No. And it turned out that we took day 4 off. It was a rest day because we were so spent and cooked by the end of day 3 that we're like, there's no way we're going to have this huge climb up to 18,000 feet and then do the final climb. So we wanted to save ourselves for our ultimate goal. So we took day 4 as a rest day. And on day 5, the first 10 miles weren't all that steep. And that really scared us, actually, because it's a 15-mile ride, and there's got to be a lot of elevation gain at some point. 4,000 feet altogether on the day. There was probably 3,000 of it in the last, 7 miles. I expected a few more switchbacks, but a lot of it was straight up the hill. So it was really crazy. Uncle Steve started walking. I was riding just about as fast as he could walk, and it was an all-out brawl up the mountain.
Wow.
We finally reached the top. My dad and Brian and John all went up to the top. I think it took them 3 hours or something.
Wow.
And then me and Uncle Steve showed up about 2 hours later.
So they were up there for a little bit without you guys.
I think they were at 19,000 for 3 hours probably.
Oh, wow.
At the beginning of the day, and more or less all along, and more so on this day. All right, everyone ride your own ride. If you're feeling good, go to the top. And if you need to slow down.
Sure.
We're there to make it.
That's crazy.
And me and Uncle Steve were struggling so bad at the top. Everyone's high-fiving and taking pictures and stuff. And I'm we need to get down now. So, we stuck around for a little bit. They had a couple of oxygen tanks, and Vikas, for example, was not feeling very good. And obviously neither was Uncle Steve. And so we got a little bit of oxygen to relieve some of the pressure.
And for the sake of listeners, who's Vikas?
Vikas is one of the filmmakers, and he came along because the director had to rent a bunch of equipment, and the studio that he rented from required that Vikas come. And it turned out awesome because he was the coolest guy. There was a little bit of a language barrier, but a lot of times he proved that was not impossible to communicate without language.
So what went through your head as you're reaching the top? You're cresting the summit. How do you feel?
As we were climbing, to a certain point, I was questioning whether I was even going to be able to make it at all. There's cameras, and the tour guides, they drive up and wait for an hour while we we catch up. Yeah. Everyone's looking at us. And Uncle Steve was I don't know if they understand that it might be dark by the time we get there, but we're going to make it up the mountain. That was pretty cool to, have that mindset and have that assurance when we're climbing as well. At the top, I think it was relief. Similar to what it was at the end of Race Across America.
Nice. And the return home, pretty uneventful for you guys? Everything go as planned?
I just remember really understanding how remote this place was because it took so long to get back.
Yeah, it's definitely the middle of nowhere.
We want to take just a second to recognize once again that there is no trip. There isn't any of this without the sponsors that allowed us to get off the ground. So thank you to Biogen and Lexio, the Kira Fay Foundation, Masonry Builders, the Avery Family Foundation, and Nugget Markets. And then we had gear provided by Catrike, Goreware, and Zeiss.
And of course, a big dent was made in research funding. As a team, we raised a little more than $300,000. But we also were able to, I think, get commitments at a much greater level than that. A lot of good work was done.
Yeah, it was really incredible to have that banner at the top of the mountain with everyone's name on it. Everybody who donated to the campaign, and that money's going to research to advance treatments and a cure for FA. Mm-hmm. A few people have asked what is next. And for me, I don't know. I hadn't thought past this trip for a long time. I don't know that I was prepared at the end of it. I think I was guarding myself from thinking beyond it just to try and make it go. I guess right now I'm really getting focused on radiotaxia and making sure I'm fully engaged there in the radiotaxia program and at work, and making sure I put as much into that as I can.
Nice. Well, adventure-wise, I've got one thing on my radar for next year. One thing I find a lot of pride in is these larger adventures every now and then. Many odds are stacked against us, stacked against folks with disability, and of course, the rare disease community. So I find a lot of motivation and a lot of pride in being able to accomplish something that our condition says we shouldn't be able to do. So the next big adventure on my radar is next summer, 2025. Years ago, we did the world's toughest bike race. The adventure in India was the world's highest paved road. And so I started thinking in that vein. And currently, the world's longest staircase is in Switzerland. And it does have a handrail on most of it.
There you go.
And so my intent is to take a small team, go to Switzerland next year, and climb the world's longest staircase, which is, if I remember correctly, 11,672 steps.
Holy
It's
cow.
not the highest. There are other ones that are higher, but this one is the longest. So more stairs or steps than any other location in the world.
And how many steps are in like one floor of a building?
Sure,
right?
it's been a minute since I've done all my research, but I believe the Twin Towers was roughly 3,000 steps. One of the buildings is 3,000, so we're talking almost 4 of those.
It's not a building, right? As I remember, it's some sort of tram or something.
It's a touristy, what do you call it, like on top of a mountain, spot for lunch and look over the Swiss Alps. There might be skiing down below, but not at the level or the height we're going to. It's called Nissenbahn. Anybody can look up or do a Google search. But there's this tram that takes tourists all the way up to the summit. And up there's a cafe and you can have lunch or whatnot. And then you just tram back. Well, the steps were constructed as a maintenance support for that tram. So it's not really a publicly traversed staircase. It's just there in case a tram gets stuck or something goes wrong. Then it can add assistance or, people can go up there with their screwdrivers and duct tape or whatever might be needed.
I like that you pointed out that there is a railing, because that's a key thing.
Sure.
If there's not a railing, it's not possible for somebody with FA. When I get in the beginning stages of ideating, it's like, all right, what's the biggest thing I can do that is actually possible? And I think you probably are constantly looking for that thing that's going to tell you that it's impossible.
Sure.
But until you find that, you keep going with the idea.
The one rail step will be challenging. That's why I've got a few people that'll go and on the other side I'll hang on to them. But another challenge about the staircase is the time frame in which we have to do it. So we're not doing an event or a race. However, the tram doesn't stop running for anybody except Red Bull. I know about it because I saw Red Bull story or commercial. So Red Bull does a big event there every summer. Yeah. And, athletes from around the globe compete. So there's one thing. Well, I'm not interested in doing that because those folks are running. However, you can rent access to the stairway outside
Okay.
of tram hours. So the allowed time frame is 4 hours, and you gotta start at 3 a.m., and you have to be done by 7 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not like we have all day to get out these 11,000
Yeah.
steps. And, comparing it to India, the elevation, I want to say, is less than 8,000 all in all. Like, it's not crazy high. I don't know where you start at, but it's manageable in terms of breathing and that kind of stuff. But still, 4 hours in my condition
Yeah.
is going to be
Yeah,
tricky.
so you have to do one Freedom Tower every hour,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yep.
For 4 hours.
Yeah.
Holy
And
cow.
of course, thankfully, you can take the tram back down. So my team will get out there, the plane, get out there, have lunch, tram down, and return home.
You're recovering right now, but what do you think is going to be your training? Probably a lot of time on the stair climber in the gym.
Yep. And I was doing a lot of Stairmaster before India, or before training for India kicked in. So I'll get back to that once I'm able, and I'll spend most of my cardio time climbing stairs, not necessarily riding the bike. I won't have to worry too much about the mask. I'll probably pull it out again, because still 8,000 feet isn't a laughing matter, but it's probably not as intense as India training.
Just the better your cardio is, the better it's going to be in general, though, too, no matter how high you are, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
well, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm pumped. Still got a lot to figure out.
Sean, I feel like this trip brought a lot of different things to our lives. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we were there together. I'm grateful for this trip. Let's move into our thank you notes. Who do you have to thank today?
Well, I mentioned Colin and Alexis not only helping me get home, but the task of pretty much organizing the getting home trip. Because I lost my phone, Colin and Alexis stepped in to help me still capture a few pictures and rearrange my flights and communicate with family and friends and just figure it out for the trip home and key communication factor. So I gotta say a big thank you to Colin and Alexis for lending me so much kindness, help, resources, all of the above. Words can't describe how much they meant to me, especially in the last few days. Of course, Colin's been a friend for years, but the level of help and support there were in the last few days of the trek home for me was incredible. So I'm grateful for them. How about you? Who are you saying thank you to?
I've mentioned my neighbor Joan quite a few times on the podcast, mainly in thank you notes. Joan organized a send-off party for me before I left at her place. She invited like 40 people over. We set up tables on the grass thanks to Paul March at our condo complex for helping us out with the tables. And thanks to another name that you've heard before, Joy, was really instrumental in putting all of this together. But Joan hosted it at her house, and really incredible. She allowed me to tell all of her friends about what we're doing. They all donated to our fundraising page, and it was really awesome. Just the other night, even though I've been home for almost 4 weeks now, she had a welcome back party.
Nice.
With all those same people at her house, and it was so much fun and just made me feel so great about the friendships that I've built around here and just all the people that are supporting us in this journey.
Yeah, very cool.
So thank you, Joan.
Love hearing that. Of course, as we mentioned, we won't be here every week for the next few months, but we hope to stay connected through social media and the like. Be sure to check out our website if you like, twodisableddudes.com, And if you want to head over to our Facebook page, we have created an album from India and our Team Himalayas adventure where you can look at photos if you like. So go look for the Team Himalayas photo album on Facebook. Connect with Kyle and I individually on social media, even the podcast profiles as well. Either one will work. We look forward to chatting with you throughout the season, a little more sporadically than normal, but we're still looking forward to it. Until next time, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.